Hi, friends. It's time for another foray into Create This Book. This is a drawing prompt book by Mariah Elizabeth that I have many episodes of, and I'm getting closer to finishing, which is good because there are 2 more books. Anyway, let's just get into it. The first page I'm going to do says, create a profession. Come up with a ridiculous job that you know is non-existent. Obviously, there's a little bit of bleeding on these pages, so I'm going to use a separate sheet of paper because I don't need that mess infecting my drawing. And I sketched this out off camera since you can't usually see what I'm doing anyway. I wanted to make sure that I got everything looking good before I went in with a fine liner. So for this prompt, I chose a flea circus trainer. And I thought that I was really smart for this because flea circuses are like a funny inside joke, you know? Like sea monkeys. They're not really monkeys, they're shrimp. Which, side note, I was devastated to find this out when I got a sea monkey kit as a kid. I really wanted tiny swimming monkeys. Anyway, flea circuses are kind of like that. Like the fleas just jump around a lot, so it looks like they're trained acrobats. So there's no such thing as a flea circus trainer, right? Excuse me? Ugh. Well, now that the outlines are done, and I'm going to fix that monstrosity later, I'm going to color this in. And I'm going to use these colored pencils that Ohuhu so kindly sent me to try out. I love Ohuhu's alcohol markers and their fine liners, so I'm really curious to see if these pencils hold up the same way. They sent me this set of 72 pencils, and it says that they're oil-based. Mostly, I use wax-based pencils, so I'm not entirely sure what to expect. But we're going to find out together. First off, the color range is pretty good, and these look nice and pigmented. My only gripe so far, and it is really nitpicky, is that they aren't sharpened to a fine point. Just an almost point. Like I said, that's really nitpicky, but I am going to have to sharpen each one a bit more before I use them. For this page, I went with a more old school coloring page vibe for the illustration. You know, where the colors are bold and blocky with very defined areas. I didn't go too crazy with blending, but I did try to add in some shadows to give it a little bit of dimension. Like I said, these pencils are really pigmented, and it's not hard at all to cover the white of the paper. Which is awesome, but that also meant that I wasn't able to create as much variation in the shading as I would have liked. With wax-based pencils, I usually go for a lighter base and then blend it out with a colorless blender. But I'm not sure if the wax-based blender would work well with these oil-based pencils. So instead, I'm just experimenting with layering different colors together before I eventually burnish everything to look like a solid color. These are very smooth to color with, and there is some kind of crumblies that come off, but the little pamphlet that came with the pencils said that that's because the lead is so soft. I am kind of jumping around on this page because I didn't really plan out what colors I was going to use, which is honestly a problem anytime I'm coloring. Also, I really need to practice drawing people. Even though she's meant to be a sort of cutesy, chibi version of a human, girl is looking malformed. One issue that I am noticing with these pencils is the color names are strange, to say the least. This is what they call peach. This is not peach. This is pink. But they do have skin tones, just with weird names. They call them light blush and beauty bush. I don't want to know what a beauty bush is. I do feel like these pencils are layering very nicely, but I definitely need more practice just using colored pencils instead of using them over other things. Okay, I know that I don't need to practice. I can color however I want, but I want to be able to also use them alone. I just want to make that clear because everyone will correct me in the comments. Everyone can art however they want to art and it will still be right. I just want to know how to art in all of the ways. After I got everything else colored in, I did finally attempt to fix her eyes. They're still not perfect, but they're far less creepy than before. So, progress, right? For the background, which is always my least favorite part, I went with soft pastels for a dirt floor and a circus tent. Then, normally I would use matte Mod Podge to seal a page in, but since I think that would smear this chalk pastel, I'm going to try out this matte laminating sheet. It would be nice if this works really well because even matte Mod Podge has a little bit of a sheen to it. The laminating sheet is a little too long on the short side and a little too short on the long side, but good enough. I cut the paper down the middle, cut out the area for the page title, and then glued the page in. And that's this one done. Honestly, I'm just okay with how this page turned out. The concept was fun, but the execution could definitely use some work. I still like the idea behind it, but the final piece feels a little underwhelming. The fleas are cute, but this girl, a bit of a hot mess. And the page just feels a little too simple. Let's hope that this next page turns out better. This page says create a dialogue. And I'm not going to read the rest of the instructions because I'm not going to follow them. Instead of creating a conversation, I'm going to use bits of dialogue. Quotes, basically, from one of my favorite movies, the Barbie movie. It just has so many funny and iconic lines. So I picked some of my favorites, and then around the page, I'm adding a few of those iconic images from the movie and some Barbie lore in general. And for this page, I wanted to try something a little different with the pencils. I decided not to burnish them this time. I wanted to focus more on blending and getting that depth and shading to really see what these pencils can do as far as details. But here's the first hurdle. I didn't have the perfect Barbie pink. So for things like this Barbie bee, I had to layer different pinks to try and mix it to the correct color. I ended up using 3 different pencils and a lot of time, and then I found out that after about 5 layers, it just wasn't accepting any more color. But I think I got pretty close to the right color. It seems that the trick with these pencils is to go in light with your layers, because these pencils are so creamy and soft that the pigment will build up quickly if you're not careful. I had to keep reminding myself to keep my hand light on the pencil. It's really tempting to press harder, but I'm really trying to take my time and apply gentle pressure. But the more that I'm using these pencils, the more I can see how much potential they have if I just give myself a bit more practice. Now for the highlights. I love adding highlights. There's just something about that pop of contrast that makes everything feel more polished. For this page, I wanted to make sure that I had really brilliant, bold highlights since Barbie is very shiny and plastic. And I knew that a white pencil wasn't going to show up over all of the layers of pencil that's already there, so I decided to use a fine tip white paint pen. I used a fine liner to trace over all of the quotes, and then I erased all of the pink pencil that was underneath with an electric eraser. Normally, I would just use a kneaded eraser, but that usually just lightens the color a bit, and I wanted it gone. The electric eraser is perfect for this because it's super precise, gets rid of all of the color, and it doesn't destroy the paper at all. It does make a pretty big mess though. For the background, I wanted to go with the bright, neon-y pattern inspired by Ken and Barbie's rollerblading outfits. And it was while I was working on this that I discovered that you can blend the pencil out a little bit with your finger. Not like a really strong blend like with the pastels, but enough to make it slightly fuzzy. It makes sense since skin naturally has oils and these pencils are oil-based. I am glad I found this trick though, because I'll definitely be finding a way to use that in the future. Finally, I used that white paint pen again to add this burst of dots that are on the pattern. Ooh, I really like how this looks. This page I am going to use some matte Mod Podge on to seal it in. I'm doing this before I glue the page into the book because that will help it to lay smoother and not wrinkle up. And I'm super happy with how this page turned out. I love how fun and pretty the colors are and how nice it all looks together. And the quotes just make me so happy. The last page I'm going to do says, create a physical collection of specific objects. Choose one of the following objects to collect on this page. Again, I'm not going to follow the rules. Instead, I want to choose something that I actually collect. I'm using a separate sheet of paper again because I'm sure you noticed that Mirabelle is really making her presence known on that page. Whew, girl, calm down. But back to this collection, I actually have a few different things that I collect, and I bet you could guess some of them. Obviously, anything rainbow. I also like things with Bigfoot on them, or balloon animal themed things, and obviously anything shark related. But this collection that I'm drawing is sweatshirts. You heard that right, sweatshirts. Hoodies, crew necks, fuzzy teddy bear sweatshirts, all of them. I'm not sure why it started, but in the last year and a half, my sweatshirt hoard has grown exponentially. I'm kind of afraid to admit this, but I'm pretty sure that I have at least 40 sweatshirts. I honestly stopped counting at 30, but my closet is very angry. I just want to live in sweatshirts all the time. And I leave them everywhere. I have a few at work, a half dozen in my car, a couple on the couch behind me in my craft room. It's a real problem. For this page itself, I chose 3 sweatshirts that I actually own, and obviously I have lots of options, but these are some of my favorites. I'm going with a slightly more cartoony version of each of them because on this page, I'm going to use the colored pencils how I would normally use them, over markers. I love doing that because it just makes the blending and shading with the pencils so easy. I started by laying down a layer of alcohol markers, being careful not to color all the way to the lines because I know that it will bleed past. I also added a nice blobby background behind each so that I don't need to add a background later. Then I went in with the pencils to add the shading, smooth out any uneven marker areas, and just give everything more depth. These 3 shirts in particular, like I said, are some of my favorites. The first sweatshirt is a secondhand gem that I found. It says, "Doing my best," with a rainbow behind it. And I love wearing this one on those days when I'm a first-class passenger on the struggle bus. It's just a good reminder to look at things positively. The second sweatshirt is actually a sort of blendy rainbow blob, but I cheated a little and turned the rainbow into stripes for the sake of the drawing. This one is probably the comfiest sweatshirt that I own. It's one of those sort of thin ones, so it's warm, but it's not too warm, you know? I've seriously considered buying a second one in case anything happens to this one. That's how much I love it. The last sweatshirt in the collection is this tie-dye pink one, which again, I found secondhand. It's not the most stylish of all of my sweatshirts, and the fit is very square and boxy, but I just love it. It's so comfy. It's my favorite sweatshirt to wear to bed. Also, can we talk about how cool the tie-dye is looking on this drawing? Now that they're all done, let me just seal these in and glue it into the book. And this page is done. It's pretty simple, but I actually think that this might be my favorite page of the 3 I did. Well, maybe the Barbie one is. No, it's this one. I can't decide. Okay, so that's all for this week. What do you think? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.